Hey everyone, Sam Ovens here and welcome to this training module called Playbook for a New Epoch. So in this training video, I'm going to basically show you our Facebook game plan and our strategy. And by that I mean, exactly how are we going to go about creating our campaign? Like, what are we trying to achieve? What are our KPIs? And what's the campaign structuring? And what's our general strategy that we've got that we're using on the Facebook platform? Like any game or like anything, you have to have a plan and you have to have a strategy. And just like in, say, with chess, for example, you would have a chess strategy. And depending on how your opponent moved his pieces, that would depend how you moved yours. And you'd have these different plays that you would use and all of that. And that is what we're going to be talking about in this module right here, Playbook for a New Epoch, where I'm going to basically walk you through my entire playbook and the most up-to-date playbook that I have for Facebook ads. And this is seriously like light years beyond where any other Facebook marketer I've seen has been. So if you really understand this stuff and you really take it in and you're able to deploy this stuff, well, you're going to be able to run laps around your competition and you're going to be able to scale extremely high, because these methods that I'm going to teach you in this video here, I have used to, in the multiple millions of ad spend, and like up to sort of $30,000 a day in ad spend. So not small numbers. And these strategies are also extremely reliable, and it allows you to use just a small number of ads, and you don't have to keep refreshing your creative and doing all of that crazy stuff that everyone else tells you that you have to do. So let's get to work and let's take you through this playbook. So here's what we're going to cover in this module. So first of all, we're going to cover the fragmentation funnel's role in nature. So our funnel that you should have built by now, and we covered that in week 4. So we're going to cover that funnel, and I'm going to really show you its role when it comes to using Facebook ads. So how does it fit in with Facebook ads, and how does it really integrate? What does it do? Why is it so special? All of that. Then we're going to cover the scientific method and the search for Blue Swan DNA. So I'm going to show you our method for setting a hypothesis, then going out, submitting that hypothesis to the market for testing, and then collecting feedback, and then iterating our new hypothesis, and keep going back in that cycle to the market to keep testing and keep keying through different variables to find what works. And then we're going to cover anti-fragile architecture and asymmetrical testing. So this is one of my secret weapons, and it's basically the way I structure and architect my campaigns. And it's a huge lesson for anyone, even people who have spent 6 figures, 7 figures on ads. Anti-fragile architecture and asymmetrical testing is going to teach you some big lessons. And then we're going to cover KPIs and their role in identifying the two swans. So we're going to cover all of our key performance metrics. I'm going to show you all of them, the hierarchy in which we look at them, like which ones are more important than the other ones, what one should we be looking at all of the time, and the benchmarks. So like, where should your numbers be? How do you know if your numbers are high or low? How do you know what's going wrong with your campaign if it's not working? All of that stuff. And I'm going to give you a spreadsheet which you can use in Google Docs or Excel to track your campaigns day to day. And it's got built-in algorithms and everything for calculating all of your KPIs. All you have to do is plug the data in. Then we're going to cover the 3 stages of growing your Blue Swan empire. So by that I mean, growing, we call a Blue Swan a profitable Facebook ad set. So how we can really start growing and propagating as many profitable Facebook ad sets as we possibly can. And that's what I refer to as the Blue Swan empire. And there's 3 stages to doing this. And you're really working through all 3 stages all the time. But in the beginning, we work through sequentially, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. But then once you're at stage 3, you're kind of doing a mixture of all 3 all the time. So it's really important to know these. And then I'm going to cover one of my most dangerous secret weapons, which is propagating and splicing Blue Swan DNA. So this is a tactic which I have not shared before and a strategy I haven't shared before, and it's extremely powerful. I basically show you how you can take profitable ads and really find the DNA structure within them and then really propagate them. And by that I mean like duplicate them and get them to start breeding, and then even splice them with new DNA so that you can create offshoots of originally successful ads. And when you understand this last thing, propagating and splicing blue swan DNA, you will be able to scale to the moon and back, and then back there again, because it really is limitless. So you're going to learn some extremely powerful methods in this Playbook for a New Epic video. So let's get to work. So at this stage of the Facebook training, we've covered these three things. We started with fractal Facebook evolution, and in that video we understood Facebook from a high-level view, and we understand its fractal nature and our terminology of blue swans and red swans, how the platform works, how the algorithm works, all of that stuff, and why having a proof of concept is essential. And I'm going to say it again, if you don't have a proof of concept, then Facebook is not the place for you to go. It will burn you alive. You want to have an established proof of concept first before you touch Facebook ads. Then the second module was called Unveiling the Facebook Algorithm. And in that module we covered how Facebook's algorithm works, how it thinks, like we covered it in detail. Like once you've watched that video, you know more than even employees at Facebook know about the Facebook algorithm. We also discussed why most people have Facebook all wrong, and the massive mistakes that people are making, and how they're really jamming the algorithm by only having one ad variation and one audience variation and a micro-targeted audience at that, and it's just totally wrong. It's the inverse of what you should actually be doing. And then we talked about initial conditions, and I helped you understand initial conditions and how important they are, and how they're really 10 times as important as the ad and audience itself. And then we discussed the forever changing competitive environment and why variation is key. Variation really is the key to Facebook and evolution, and really evolving different combinations, working hand in hand with the algorithm, trying to find that perfect combination in the current environment. And then we covered the third module, which is Facebook's Book of Law. And this is really understanding the rules of the game when it comes to using Facebook. Because the last thing we want to do is get our account banned, which is what we call the mark of the beast. And we talked about creating your account and your fan page properly. So setting up your business manager account, setting up your fan page, creating a likes campaign to get enough likes, making sure there's posts on it and everything. Then we discussed creating a compliant website, having all the essential legal documents on there, and then following the basic rules for ad account survival. Like different things like, don't use tacky images, don't use different buzzwords, don't make income claims, don't call your audience out, all of those things. Now, I'm sure all of you have gone through these videos sequentially and watched all of them in full, one first, then two, then three, before moving on to this video. If you are not one of those people, then honestly you need to go through this training in order. It will not make any sense unless you go through the stuff in order, because we're going to be using words and terms and things that you won't understand unless you've gone through and done these first. So if that's you, don't be that person, go back and watch it. And if you have done that, now you should have a basic understanding of everything and all the essential tools ready. And now it's time to get into our game plan and strategy. So first up, let's talk about the fragmentation funnel's role in nature. So do you remember our client acquisition methodology? And here is a basic high-level view of it. We have our value video, then we have, which is the video which we create, which is in between 50 or 10 and 30 minutes long. We talk about what we have to offer and everything and the problem and all of that. Then they go and apply for a survey, and then they schedule a call with us. And we drive traffic into that funnel using both organic methods, which are free methods, and paid methods, which is Facebook ads. And paid methods is what we're discussing all through week 5, which is Facebook advertising, and really how to use Facebook ads in combination with our fragmentation funnel to achieve optimum results. And specifically our fragmentation funnel. So this is kind of like a high-level basic view, but now I'm going to show you just a drilled down version of it where we really cover every page. So it starts off with Facebook ads, and we use those ads to target different people who we think are within our audience. And then those people click on those ads, they come to our landing page, and then they go to our value video, and then a survey, and then a call, and then they become a customer. Now I'm just going to quickly step you through those so you can see. So you can have a look at this, samovensdemo.com/case study. This is the landing page. So people come from a Facebook ad, they click on it, then they come to this, our landing page. Then they click here, and this thing pops up, and they enter in their email address. Then they see our value video. So it says step 1, watch this case study right now. They watch this value video, and this one's 21 minutes long. Then if they want to, they apply for a strategy session so they can talk to us and get some more help. So they click this button, and then they schedule a strategy session with us. And we use this little scheduling tool here. And when it finally loads, the user enters in their information, they click next and everything, and then they come to a survey. I'm just going to skip this for now because it's loading too slow. Then they come to a survey that looks like this. They enter in all of their information, and then the final page looks like this. And it says, awesome, your strategy session is scheduled. And then from here, they're automatically scheduled into our calendar, and then we get we then show up at the time they scheduled, and we have the strategy session with them, and we take them through the alchemic conversion script, and they either buy or they don't buy. And that is basically the entire end-to-end process, which I'm talking about here. So we got the ads, the landing page, the value video, survey, call, customer. And then this is the fragmentation funnel with the math applied to it. So with this funnel, it is really important that we understand our numbers. And here's the sort of rough sort of range that we see these numbers go in between. And this is if it's successful. You know, if you can have numbers totally outside of what I'm showing you on the screen here, but if your campaign is going to be successful and if your funnel is successful, then your numbers should all be within these ranges. So we pay in between $1 and $3 per click on a Facebook ad. Then our landing page converts at 20%. This gets us a cost per lead, which is a cost per email of $5 to $15. Then the people watch the value video. So we're basically paying $5 to $15 per person to view the value video. Then only really 5% of those people who watch it actually take us up on our offer and go through and complete the survey. And then they schedule an appointment with us in our calendar. And then we typically have like a 80% show-up rate. And this is people that schedule and then show up to the call. Because typically we cancel about 10% of applications because they're not a good fit when we look at their survey. And then typically about 10% of people won't show up to the call. And that's why we have an 80% show-up rate. And this means that we're paying in between $50 and $300 per call, cost per strategy session, CPS. And then when we talk to those people, we typically have a 20% conversion rate, call conversion rate here. That means for every 5 people we talk to, 1 of them buys. And that means that we have a cost per acquisition, a cost per paying customer of in between $250 and $1,500. And that's why your product, your service, your program, whatever it is you're selling, should be higher than these numbers, and then the difference between the two is obviously profit. And that's really how it works. That's the math behind it. And at this stage of the training, I'm assuming you have already built out and thoroughly tested your fragmentation funnel. And everything should be working correctly and tested on both desktop and mobile. So back in week 4, I showed you how to do it, gave you the template and everything. And from this point on, I'm really just assuming that you've already built it, you've tested it, you've got friends to test it to, and you're sure that it is solid. that you must make sure before you progress through the rest of these videos. And if you haven't built out your fragmentation funnel yet, you must do that now before progressing, otherwise this module and all of the following modules will make no sense and be of little to no value at all. And for training and detailed step-by-step instructions on how to build the fragmentation funnel, please go to week 4 and then the paid attraction methods video and the assembling the war machine video. Those 2 modules contain everything you need to set up your fragmentation funnel. Step-by-step instructions, templates, everything. And we have a live demo of the fragmentation funnel which can be viewed at samovensdemo.com/case study. And that just looks like this. So if we go to this, here is a demo of the fragmentation funnel. You can go to this link in your browser, go through it, check it out, see exactly how it works, and then we provide you with a link so that you can actually download the fragmentation funnel with one click. So that URL to go to is consulting.com/clickfunnels so that you can get this template for the fragmentation funnel for free, and you can download it with one click. You just come to this page here, consulting.com/clickfunnels. You click install your funnels. If you already have a ClickFunnels account, you click yes I do. If you don't, you click no I don't. And then the page will look like this once you've created your account. And you can see that number 2, we provide you with the fragmentation funnel. You can view a demo of it here, and then you can just install it here with one click. And like I said, week 4, these 2 modules here will tell you exactly how to set it all up. Paid attraction methods and assembling the war machine. So from this point on, I'm assuming that it's already built and you've already got it. Now we're going to talk about the scientific method and the search for the blue swan DNA. So what are blue swans and what is blue swan DNA? Well, really, I've referred to, a lot of times by now about how our main role is that we're breeding blue swans. And our main job with Facebook ads is to breed blue swans and grow the empire. And this means to try different iterations of possible blue swan DNA strings made up of these variables. Audience, message, image. That's the string. That's what we call a blue swan DNA string, because these things are stringed together. And what we're really doing is we're trying different iterations. There can be any number of possible audiences, any number of possible messages, and any number of possible images. However, when combined together, some will work way better than others. And this is what we call like the genetic makeup or the DNA string. And a blue swan is basically a profitable Facebook ad set. It means it's within KPI. And a red swan is a non-profitable ad set. And that means it's outside of KPI. And what we're trying to do is breed blue swans, which means profitable ad sets. And each ad set acts as a cell, and it contains a string of DNA made up of audience, message, image. And if the cell is healthy and produces a desirable ROI, we call it a blue swan, and we breed more of them from the healthy DNA string. Because if a DNA string is healthy and the swan is blue, that means that the DNA makeup of that swan, it is probably the right DNA makeup for more blue swans. So that's why it's important that we look at the string. And if the cell is unhealthy and non-profitable, we call it a red swan and we cull it from our population. That means we turn it off, we delete it, and we want to look at the string as well to make sure that we know what sort of strings work and we know what sort of strings don't work. And it's pointless to guess the DNA string for blue swans. Like, you just can't come into Facebook and then just kind of guess at what the right sort of string of audience, message, image is. You will be shooting totally blind. It will take you way too much time to find something out, and you might not even find something out. We need to get a head start before coming to Facebook. That's how it works. So it's pointless trying to guess, and we must get the initial conditions from our established proof of concept. So I know I've said this so many times now, I'm probably sounding like a robot, but Facebook is no place for you if you don't have an established proof of concept. And by that, I mean that you must have at least 3 paying clients, and they must all have purchased the same offer from you. So you should have a niche offer result combination, and that should be proven with 3 paying customers. And if you have that, then what's present inside there'll be a fractal pattern that's present in that proof of concept, and it'll help you to take a good guess at what is going to be a correct audience message image string. And then that's how we're able to get a head start with Facebook, because we know something. We've got a proof of concept, we've actually been testing, we've been doing strategy sessions, talking to people, collecting feedback. We have information learned. And so then we come to Facebook and we extract that fractal pattern from our proof of concept and we load it into Facebook and try scaling it up. And we set the initial conditions, and then we work hand in hand with Facebook's algorithm to optimize different variations and find out what works and what doesn't work. And that's what we refer to as breeding blue swans. So how do we go about finding the correct DNA? Well, do you remember our scientific method, which is basically we have a thesis, an antithesis, and then we have the synthesis, which becomes the new thesis because it feeds back around and then it happens all over again. And this is basically, the master algorithm of all evolution and everything. It's how your brain works, it's how everything works with this simple algorithm. You have, it really just looks like this. We've covered this multiple times throughout the entire training so far. And in week 1, with the natural law and the consulting equation, when we're trying to build a successful consulting business, we're basically looking for the right combination of niche offer result variables. And that's what really makes a successful consulting business, when you get the right niche offer result variables lined up. And the only way you get those variables lined up correctly is when you're doing testing. So you have to set a hypothesis, you go out to the market, and you're testing by doing strategy sessions, talking to people, collecting feedback, iterating your hypothesis, and you're creating a new one, and you just keep going. That's our scientific method. And eventually, that process always finds an optimal combination of these 3 variables. And when you achieve that, that's when you have a proof of concept, that's when you start getting customers, making a lot of money, and the better optimized these 3 variables are, the more money you make, and the easier it is to sell. That is how business works, and that's how our consulting businesses work as well. And then another one which we talk about in the mindset training is how we have our current situation, which is us now, doing what we're doing, thinking what we're thinking. And then we have our desired situation, which is, out in the future. And then we have an action which we do, and that brings about the new situation, which might be the desired situation or it might not be. And then we receive feedback from that, and then we're able to iterate, and next time we want to achieve that desired situation, we take a different action based on the feedback we got from the last time. So this is how human beings optimize, it's how everything in nature optimizes, and this is basically how your brain works. And then we have 2 key things which the human brain can do, and that is setting a hypothesis. So we have a goal hypothesis and an action hypothesis. So how it works is, we're sitting in our current situation where we are right now, and then we have these desires and these dreams and these things we want. And that's really our goal hypothesis. That's what we set a goal for. And then what we do is we look out into the future and we're like, okay, we want to achieve this goal. So then our brain comes back to sort of now, and it's like, okay, well, what actions are we going to take so that we can achieve that goal? And you start hypothesizing about what possible actions might work together to achieve that goal. And once you've set the goal hypothesis and the action hypothesis, well, then you actually take action in real life. And then when you take action, the new situation comes about, and it either is or isn't in alignment with the goal. And either way, you receive feedback and you are able to iterate and try again. And each time you get closer and closer to it. And this is how we optimize with everything in life. And it's not just us, it's algorithms, like computer algorithms, Facebook's algorithm, different organisms. Everything in the world pretty much uses this model. And when it comes to Facebook ads, we're constantly optimizing for the perfect combination of variables in the current environment. And this combination of variables we refer to as DNA, and we also refer to it as a DNA string. And this string is made up of these three variables: audience, message, image. And basically what Facebook's algorithm is doing is it's keying through multiple, like hundreds of millions of different variables. And the variables it's playing with is audiences, messages, and images. And it's playing with these, and it's trying to find the right combination to get a specific result. And with Facebook, the main result it's trying to get is clicks, and it's trying to get people over to your website, and it's also trying to get people to opt in, enter their email address and take action on the offer that you're providing. So Facebook's constantly optimizing what audience should see what message with what image, and it's trying to find the best match. And so if your message and image doesn't resonate very well with your audience, well, then Facebook's going to prioritize another advertiser above you, and they're going to get more traffic. So constantly we're trying to find the best combination of these variables, because then Facebook is going to give us the majority share of all of the traffic. On Facebook, the advertiser that has the most powerful combination of these variables wins. They take all the traffic. And if you don't have very good combinations of these variables, you pretty much get no traffic, or you actually do get none at all. And this is why it's important to start with a proof of concept, so that when we start creating these combinations of variables, we have some idea what we're doing and we're not just shooting blind. And just like how our brain works, we want to set a results hypothesis, and we want to set an audience message hypothesis, because we're going to take the action when we launch our ads. We're going to actually create ads, we're going to create different combinations of images, we're going to find different combinations of audiences, and we're going to push it live, and we're going to test it in real life, and we're going to get results. But before we go and do it live, we want to form a hypothesis, because that is how our scientific method works. We start with the hypothesis, and then once we've done that, then we take the action, and then we see how the action aligned with the hypothesis, and based on that, we iterate and adjust based on the feedback, and we get better and better every single time. That's our method for optimization, and it is seriously powerful when you use it properly. So first of all, we need to set these hypotheses. We need to figure out what we're actually aiming for in terms of results, and then what we believe is going to be a good combination to try and achieve those results. And to be clear, here is our workflow. So here's our scientific method workflow, step by step. There's really 5 steps to it. So before we touch Facebook, we need to form a hypothesis for both the results we expect and the combination of audience message required to achieve those results. And in order to form a hypothesis, we must have an established proof of concept. Without a proof of concept, you may as well burn your money. I've made this point, and I'm pretty sure it's clear by now. And then when you're forming your results hypothesis, we must hypothesize about the results we expect to achieve with our experiment. So, if you're in a science lab and you were going to do an experiment, before you go and do the experiment, you hypothesize, you take a guess at, what you think is going to happen and all of that, and then you do the experiment and then you compare. And that way you keep working that way. So to help you understand the benchmarks and what to expect, I've provided you with these worksheets so that you can really get a clear idea. Because most people, when they go to Facebook, they have no idea what to expect. Their results hypothesis, even if they want to set one, they have no idea what to aim for. They don't know what's possible. And they don't know what the right numbers are in order to achieve profit. So you guys are really miles ahead of everyone else, because I'm going to give you these resources so you know exactly what to aim for. So I'm essentially helping you set your results hypothesis right away. So the spreadsheet's available for download beneath this video in the resources section. And it's called your paid client attraction metrics, or paid attraction metrics. And you can download it as a Microsoft Word file, Microsoft Excel file, However, I recommend you use Google Docs, and you just click on this link here and you open it in Google Docs, and boom, you've got it open. And that way you can update it here, and it's always live online. You can access it from your browser. So on the first tab here, you'll see it's called Performance Dashboard. So here we've got our average student performance benchmarks. And so we can look here at these different things. So for example, clicks. So if you want to have a successful campaign and a successful fragmentation funnel, you should be within these two numbers. One's low, one's a bit higher. You should be somewhere within these ranges for all of these different things. Otherwise, if you're outside of these ranges, there's a high chance that you're not making any money and you're actually losing money. So I've provided you with these so you know exactly what's going on. So with clicks, our click-through rate is in between 0.5 and 1%. Then our landing page conversion rate's in between 20 and 30%. Our video conversion rate's in between 5 and 10%. And our call show-up rate's in between 80 and 90%. And then our call conversion rate's in between 10 and 20%. And that means that our cost per click's in between $1 and $3. Our cost per lead's in between $5 and $15. Our cost per survey's in between $50 and $300. Our cost per call is in between $55 and $330. And our cost per acquisition, our CPA, is in between $275 and $3,300. And then based on these numbers, these are kind of like the funnel numbers and the ad numbers and all of that. Based on these, your return on investment, which is what we call the Polaris star, this is like the most important thing. It should be in between, it should be in between 100 to 200%. That means you're getting at least sort of 200. It means you're getting at least 2 to 1 to 3 to 1 on your money. So if you spend $1,000 on ads, you should get back $2,000 to $3,000 in sales. So those are the sort of numbers you should be aiming for. So you should be initially aiming to get leads, and you should be aiming to get clicks at around this cost, and leads at around this cost, and strategy sessions at around this cost. And then once you've got enough of these things, then you should be aiming to pick up customers for in between this price here. And here is everything you need to know. And this makes it really simple because this allows you to set your results hypothesis right now. So you're really aiming to get, your results hypothesis should be to get clicks in between $1 and $3, leads in between 5 and 15, strategy sessions in between 55 and 330, and then customers in between this and that. And the price of your monthly service or your program or whatever it is you're selling should exceed these numbers you've hypothesized. So I'm pretty sure everyone gets that. And so that is how we form your results hypothesis. Then step 3 is you want to form your audience message hypothesis. So we must hypothesize about the combination of audience message variables we believe will work together to achieve the results hypothesis. And the only way to do this is if you have an established proof of concept. So I know I've said this to death now, but you have to have a proof of concept, otherwise you have no idea about what's going to achieve these results. So the niche offer result combination present there will provide you with all the essential clues. So when you have a proof of concept, it means you have a niche offer result combination that works. And what happens, the way fractals and everything work is, when something works and you've got at least 3 customers, well, there should be clues in there as to what is going to work on the Facebook platform. And you should have done strategy sessions, you should have spoken to people, you know their objections, you know their hot buttons, you know everything by now, and you should have collected a lot of feedback on your worksheets. And then we're going to really go looking at that stuff, and that stuff's going to help us create our audience and message hypothesis. And that's going to help us choose like different audiences where we think our people are, and it's going to help us create different messages which we think is going to resonate with these people. And then once we've formed the results hypothesis and the action or the audience message hypothesis, that's perfect. Now we've set both of these things. Now we're ready to take it to the market and actually test it in real life. And this is step 4, testing. So once we have formed the results hypothesis and the audience message hypothesis, it's time to submit it for real-life testing on the Facebook ads platform. And then what we do is we launch our ads, we launch a variation of different ads and audiences and images, and then we leave it for a few days and we observe the results. So after about 3 to 4 days, we come back into Facebook and we see how our experiment went. And some of our ad sets will be within KPI, hopefully, and most of them are probably going to be outside of KPI. If they're in KPI, that means they're blue swans, they're good, we can leave them. If they're outside of KPI, it means they're red swans, means we've got to turn them off and delete them. And then step 5 is iteration. So once we have observed the results of our test, we collect feedback about what worked and what didn't work. So we want to write down, what audiences worked, what images worked, and what messages worked. And then we want to write down what things didn't work. And we want to constantly keep track of what worked and what didn't work, because we basically want to do more of what worked and less of what didn't work. This is really simple, but this is literally what we're doing. This is all of what business is. I know it sounds so simple, but people go and make things so complicated. And this is our scientific method workflow. This is what we're doing. We're just doing it over and over and over again, and each time we're getting better and better and better and learning more and more and more. So this is a basic overview of it. Now we're going to talk about anti-fragile architecture and asymmetrical testing. So when we're testing our hypotheses and looking for successful combinations of blue swan DNA, we need to be aware of our downside. So what's downside, you might be thinking? Well, we constantly need to be aware of our downside. And here I'm going to explain exactly what it is. So when advertising with Facebook ads, it doesn't matter whether we're testing running ads that work or ads that don't work. Everything we do costs money. In order to use Facebook ads, we've got to pay. It costs money. Every time someone clicks, we have to pay Facebook. And upside. Well, upside is what we call the money we make from profitable Facebook ads. For example, we might spend $1,000 on ads and we might make $3,000. And we would call the $3,000 we made as upside. So that would be $3,000 upside and there would have been $1,000 downside because we spent that. And that means that there would be more upside than downside, which means that we make a profit of $2,000. And then downside. Downside is what we call the money we spend or lose from unsuccessful Facebook ads. Also, money we spend on successful ads. It's still downside because it costs us money. An example is we spend $1,000 on ads and we might make $0. Well, we'd call the $1,000 we lost downside. So I'm pretty sure you get it. Money spent is downside, money made is upside, right? And you want to constantly be aware of this. So it is of extreme importance that we always know our upside and downside when advertising on Facebook. And Facebook ads is no place for creative, artistic, and emotional thinking. I've seen so many people lose their shirts on Facebook because they think something looks cool or something looks cute or whatever, and it doesn't work, and I see so many people lose their money. So Facebook ads is a strict risk and reward game, where the people who know their numbers take all, they take everything. And the people who ignore their numbers, they lose their shirts and everything else. And at all times, you must understand how much you have at risk, and you must be totally fine with losing money before making money, because that's how it works. And by this I don't mean huge amounts, but when you're using Facebook, quite often you're spending hundreds of dollars before you see any money come in. And sometimes you're spending thousands of dollars before you see any money come in. And that's how it works. And you really have to get your head around that before you use it, because otherwise it will freak you out and you constantly will think that it's not working and taking your money, because when you're using it, you're paying before the results come back. And sometimes in the beginning, when you're trying to figure out different combinations and you're testing, well, you're going to be spending, a few $1,000s, and all of those thousands of dollars are going to be going towards finding out what works. So you really have to be aware of upside and downside. Otherwise, Facebook can take all of your money and it'll leave a bad taste in your mouth. You'll probably never use it again. But when you know how to use it properly, it'll make you rich. So how do you calculate downside? Well, when advertising on Facebook, 100% of the money you're spending all the time, you should assume that it is at risk. And what I mean by that is you could lose it. Every dollar I'm always spending on Facebook, I assume that there's a chance that that could be lost. It's like an investment. If you buy a particular house or some real estate or whatever, that money could be lost. But, you analyze it and you think that, the maximum that you could lose is this because the price of the property couldn't possibly go below this, right? You do these calculations. But with Facebook ads, it is possible that all the money you're spending could just go and you might not get anything back in return. So you always want to understand this. And you should look at your bank balance and your cash flows and determine the amount you can safely risk each month for ads. This is crucial. You want to look how much money have you got in your bank account. Then you want to look at how much money are you consistently making each month. Now, Facebook isn't a place to go if you don't have any money and if you're not making any money, because it's just going to make you poorer and it's going to freak you out. It's a place to go when you've got some money to bet and you also have some cash flows to replenish that money. And we aim to make profit and ROI, return on investment, every time. However, you must prepare for the worst case at all times, which is, you lose everything. And the reason why I say this is because it does something to you emotionally when you prepare like this. I learned a lot of this from investing. And the worst thing you can do with investing in Facebook ads is to get emotional. And so the worst investors are emotional ones. And the worst investors are the people who bet all of their money on stuff and they need it to work. And whenever you need something like this to work, it won't work. So the last place you want to put your last $1,000 or your last $500 is Facebook ads. Because, when you come to Facebook ads and you're expecting like a miracle and you're expecting it quick and you really need it to work, well, your emotions are going to cloud your judgment and it's not going to work for you. So when you set a budget with Facebook and you are fine, you work out that your business is going to be fine and you're going to be fine if that money is lost, then it sets you up mentally, because obviously we're not aiming to lose that money. But if it does happen, we're not going to be in panic because, it'll still suck, but it won't be the end of the world. And we always need to make sure that we're running like this, because if we run the other way around, your emotions are going to cloud your judgment. You're not going to be able to make any good decisions. So the first number you want to figure out is that. How much can you risk? And the first number you need to be aware of is your testing budget. So this is the amount of money you allocate towards testing and finding the right combination of variables to produce a profitable campaign. So this is when we're initially testing and we're testing our hypotheses, we're trying to find out a combination that works. And this particular period of testing, if you don't have a proof of concept, well, it will never work. So that's that. If you do have a proof of concept and you go into the testing period, well, it can cost in between $1,000 and $3,000 to find the right combination of variables. Now, it can cost less and it can cost more, but this is just a rough sort of range. So you really don't want to touch Facebook until you've got at least really $2,000. Once you've got $2,000 and you're like, okay, I'm happy to use this money for testing. I understand that I could lose it all, but I also understand that it could make me a lot more. That's when you're in the right position to financially touch Facebook as a platform. And the second number you need to be aware of is your daily budget. And this is the amount of money you allocate towards advertising each day. And you can calculate this by taking the sum of the money you can safely lose divided by 14 days. And what you want to do is write that number down right now. You want to pause this video right now and you want to calculate all of these numbers. So first of all, how much are you able to spend, how much are you able to risk each month? Look at what's in your bank account, look at how much money you're making each month from your business, and then figure out, are you able to risk $2,000 to $3,000 to test Facebook ads? It's either a yes or a no. If it's a yes, then you can do it. Awesome. If it's a no, then well, you need to keep saving and you need to keep using organic methods before you can touch Facebook. Plain and simple. You can do it if you've got less money, but it won't work for you. So I'm just going to be completely straight with all of these things. And then the second number you need to determine is your daily budget. So if you calculated that you could risk $2,000 a month, like you looked at your income and you're like, okay, I can risk $2,000 a month, well, you'd take $2,000 and then you would divide that by 14 days, and that would give you $142 a day. So your daily budget would be $142. Because you could lose that money for 14 days before you would have to stop. And then the third number you need to be aware of is what we call a hard stop. And this is at the point where you must pause all of your ads because you have hit your downside limit. And what I mean by this is, this is, in the beginning, you calculated how much you could safely risk each month. And, you worked out that number by looking at your bank balance, looking at how much money you're making, and you came up with that number. Well, that's how we calculate our daily budget, and then we can only lose that for 14 days before we've got to stop our ads. However, if we're making profit, we can go for longer, but that's the maximum we can lose each month before we have to stop. And it's important that you figure out this hard stop number, because if you ever get to it, well, you've really got to stop, because otherwise you can get yourself into trouble. You don't want to keep going and then you can't pay rent and you can't do all of this other stuff. I mean, that's just irresponsible. That's why we set these hard stops before we even touch Facebook ads, so that we know what our downside limits are. And when you do this, it will just make Facebook easier for you. You're not going to lose your shirt with it. I mean, you're going to be much more calm and non-emotional about it. You're going to be actually acting like a professional investor. And that's how you make a lot of money with Facebook. And if your hard stop was, let's say you could lose $2,000 a month, and that's $142 a day if we divide it by 14 days, that means that you could lose $142 a day for 14 days without any income on your ads, and that would be your limit. And you're probably thinking, well, how do we keep track of this? Well, first off, we define what these numbers are, and that's what you should have done in the previous slide. You should have paused the video and written those numbers down. And then we track each day's results using our paid attraction metrics spreadsheet. And this is the spreadsheet available for download beneath the video. I just covered it before. It's called paid attraction metrics. And we use it to track our performance each day. I'll just pull it up again and I'll show you exactly how we use it to track our downside. So we've got the performance dashboard on the front page, on the front tab. And then if we go into month 1 here, you set the date and everything, and then you put your ad spend in here, and you calculate these numbers the day after each day's advertising. So, the morning after, you're reporting on yesterday's data, because we need a full 24 hours to aggregate all of these numbers. So you'd put in the ad spend, the impressions, relevance, CPM, clicks, click-through rate, all of this stuff. Now, everything in grey you don't need to put in. The little formulas that I plugged into the spreadsheet do all of the grey boxes for you. All you need to plug in is the white cells. And if you hover over these things, it tells you what each one is. You can see these things are popping up. All right? So when you plug all of this in here, you'll have this column here, which is called P&L, profit and loss balance. So this box here is how we track our downside. So when we're looking at this, when we need to stop, when our hard stop is hit, this would look like this. It would say minus $2,000. So if you ever saw that in your P&L column, then that's when you've got to stop. Immediately when you see this, you have to go into your Facebook ads account, you just have to turn everything off, you have to pause it, because you've hit your hard stop limit. And this, even if you get clients and you're making money, you know, this number might go up to 10 and whatever, but then you might hit a slump and you might go down, and now you're coming down into, you know, as soon as you hit this here, that's your hard stop. You have to stop. And this is why we set that number, because we want this to be as high as possible, but we need to have a hard stop on our downside, otherwise, you know, we can get ourselves into financial trouble. And this is what all professional investors do. It's what everyone who knows what they're doing and is smart with money does. You always calculate your downside and you set a hard stop there. So that is how we do that. And that's how you track it. It's pretty simple. And you need to be disciplined and report on your numbers every day. You know, if you set Facebook ads up and then you forget about it for like a week and then you come back, well, it might have taken more money from you than you thought it was going to. You have to check on it each day, and you have to report on your numbers each day. You have to be very disciplined like that. And at all times using Facebook, you must keep upside and downside in mind, even when you create your campaigns. And now for one of my secret weapons. Now I want to show you one of the most powerful things that I've created when it comes to using Facebook. And it's something that I call anti-fragile architecture and asymmetrical testing. And the way I think about ads and the way, you know, smart people think about investments is like this. You've got your downside and your upside. And the downside is, you know, this here where we can see these negatives, and we've got this trend line going down. And you can see this is losing, minus dollars down. And then we've got upside, which is above the line, and these are all the pluses. This is money that we're making, it's profit. And the nature of every single investment you're ever going to do as a human being is that there's always going to be downside. And that, for sure, it's an absolute fact, there's always going to be downside. There is not always upside. Not every investment has upside. And what you're always looking at is something called asymmetry here. And what asymmetry means is it means that both sides aren't symmetrical. So it means that one side's way bigger than the other side. And you're always looking for risk-reward situations where the downside isn't that big, but the upside is huge. Because if you do take the downside, which is likely a lot of the time, then the upside has to more than pay it back. If this downside here was the same size as this upside, then it means that we would make $0. And if the downside was bigger than the upside, it means we'd lose money. And so this is what you have to think about when you're using Facebook ads. All the time you have to know what the downside is and what the potential upside is, because only then are you setting it up properly so that you can actually make profit. And there's a special way that I architect these campaigns in order to do that. So anti-fragile architecture and asymmetrical testing. So when structuring our campaigns, we want to have asymmetrical risk-reward where risk is minimal and reward is uncapped with no limits. And to do this, we run multiple variations of ads with multiple images to multiple large audiences, all with the lowest budgets possible. So we set our budgets on these ad sets and these variations pretty low. I mean, it's not as low as it can go because I know how low we can go and actually still make it work. You know, you could put 50 cents in there, but it wouldn't work because, you know, clicks cost more than 50 cents, so you're not really going to get anywhere. But I know the numbers, and I know as low as you can really bid on stuff and actually get it to work. And I'm going to share those numbers with you later. But why we want to do this is we want to have lots of different variations with a really low budget. And this way we can test lots of combinations, and we are never really going to lose that much money because we have set small budgets for everything. So we're getting lots of exposure with two different combinations, but with a very little downside. And we also hard stop our losses. You know, we also know how much we can possibly lose before it's bad. And we have that P&L column in our paid attraction metric spreadsheet, so we can constantly keep track of that. As soon as that hits minus 2,000 or whatever your number is, well, you've got to pause, you've got to shut it off, because now you're hitting your downside limit. And the cool thing about Facebook ads is that, we have this limited downside where we have small budgets and we've got a hard stop on our losses, which means that we can't really lose infinitely, because we've stopped, we've got a hard stop. There's only so much we can possibly lose. But there is infinite amounts that we can possibly gain. So there's huge asymmetry here. Because when things work, we can make millions and millions and millions, but when things don't work, we hard stop our losses at $2,000 or whatever your number is. So that's how we get asymmetry here. And this way we can test thousands of variations with limited downside, and then as soon as we find winning combinations, we can scale them up with almost uncapped upside. So that means we can start scaling. When something's profitable, if we put $1 into Facebook and we get out $5, we're going to spend as much money as we possibly can, because, why would you not? If you put $1 in a machine and got out $5, would you just take your $5 and then walk away? You'd probably try putting more dollars in and see, how many times you could do it for. And then you'd probably start trying to put $100 in and so on and so forth. Well, that's how it works. That's how Facebook works, and that's how I'm going to show you how to set it up. Now we're going to talk about KPIs and their role in identifying the two swans. So imagine this for a moment. Your friend asks you to drive your car from your home to a location you've never been before, and you must drive completely blindfolded. Would you do it? And the same is true if you use Facebook ads without knowing your KPIs. And you might think, no, that's not the same. It's almost more dangerous to use Facebook without knowing your KPIs than it is to drive a car blindfolded. And without KPIs, without knowing your KPIs, your Facebook ads account is headed straight for a tree, just like if you're driving blindfolded. And just like driving blindfolded, you won't have any idea you're about to crash until you've crashed and you've broken your neck. Same with Facebook. If you don't measure your KPIs, if you don't know them, then you might actually think that you're making money. You might actually think things are going okay because different people are clicking on your ads, liking them, you're getting some emails and whatnot, but you could be headed straight for a tree. And the only way you'll know whether you've crashed is like when you actually crash. So it's a really horrible situation to be in. I see even pretty smart people making this mistake. They think just because people are opting in for their information and they're getting emails and leads, and they think just because people are liking their stuff that it's worth it. But you don't know whether it's worth it unless you're selling something. The only true test for advertising is profit, nothing else. So that's why KPIs are so important. You never want to run ads just to get things like email opt-ins. I hear people do this all the time. They create PDFs, or they create free reports, or they create tripwires, or all of these crazy things, and then they advertise them, and they're like, yeah, this is going well because I'm getting leads for $2, or I'm getting leads for $1, I'm list building, I'm doing all of this. Well, honestly, that's stupid behavior. You never want to do anything just to get emails, because all of the emails you're getting might be wrong, they might never buy from you, and then that's a total waste of money. So this is why we need to keep track of the numbers. We need to know our KPIs. Otherwise, we're not going to know that we've crashed, or we might not know that we're heading for a tree until it's too late. And the moral of the story is basically don't use Facebook ads without knowing your KPIs. So what are KPIs? Well, KPIs are key performance indicators. And when using Facebook ads, it is mandatory to use KPIs to track the performance of your ads and your fragmentation funnel. And every day you must check your ads and plug your key numbers into the paid attraction metric spreadsheet so that you can gauge your performance. And the spreadsheet provides benchmarks for all KPIs so that you can compare your numbers with other students and see where your campaign or funnel is breaking down. And like I said, this is available for download beneath the video. And your KPIs are here. It says average student performance benchmarks. These here don't change. These are set. However, when you enter in all of your numbers here, these numbers here will change because this is your performance. And what you're basically doing is trying to compare these your numbers here to these numbers here and see where you're outside of KPI and where you're within KPI. And where you're outside of KPI, well, that's where your funnel or your ads are broken, and that's where you need to drill down and start fixing it, finding out what the problem is, trying to fix it until you've got all of your KPIs in alignment with the benchmarks. Once they're in the benchmarks, well, you should be making profit. And it's as simple as that. I've really made it as simple as I possibly can here. I've given you all of the numbers, all of the calculations, all of the benchmarks, everything. And that's how we use KPIs. And now we're going to talk about using KPIs to identify the two swans, red swans and blue swans. So a blue swan is a Facebook ad set that is within KPI, and a red swan is an ad set outside of KPI. And we need KPIs to accurately identify whether an ad set is a blue swan or a red swan, because without KPIs, we're driving blind and we have absolutely no idea. Worse yet, we will treat red swans as blues and blues as reds. So this is the sort of messed up stuff that can happen when you don't use KPIs and you don't track stuff. I've seen people think they've found like a profitable ad set, and they start spending more money. They start like duplicating the ad set that they think is profitable, and they start turning off other ad sets which they believe aren't profitable based on their gut. And then later on, it turns out that they turned off the things that were working and making the money, and they started spending more money and growing the things that were losing them money. And that might sound crazy to you. You might be like, well, that would never happen. Well, honestly, if you don't track your KPIs, you have absolutely no idea. You don't even know. And like I said before, Facebook advertising is all about the numbers, not the emotions. So it doesn't matter if you think an ad is cool, pretty, cute, or even if you are absolutely certain that the ad that you've got is going to work. It doesn't even matter if you think an ad is working, because only the numbers can judge. Only the numbers can actually tell us whether something is working or not. Blue swans and red swans all look the same unless we have KPIs. KPIs are the only things that can show us what a swan is, red or blue. If we just try and use our eyes and no KPIs, we have no idea what we're looking at, and we might even muddle them up and get them back the front. Now we're going to talk about growing your population of blue swans. And by this I mean finding ad sets that are profitable and then starting to grow them, starting to duplicate them and propagate them and really scale it up. So our main objective with Facebook ads is to grow our population of blue swans, as I've said. And we do this in 3 key stages. So let's take a look at these 3 stages right now. So the 3 stages of breeding blue swans. So stage 1, which is where we're going to start, is called testing for blue swans. So the first stage is to test our hypotheses by submitting different ad angles, different ad images, and different audiences to Facebook for testing. And we do this by we identify ad sets within KPI, and we keep these, which are blue swans, and we identify ad sets outside of KPI, and we delete these, red swans. Then once we've done that, once we've done enough of it, then we've actually identified some blue swans, then we would start scaling. However, if we don't identify any blue swans, well, we've got to keep iterating and testing until we do find blue ones. We can't scale until we've found blue ones. Otherwise, all we'd be doing is scaling red ones and exponentially scaling our losses. So we have to keep testing in this stage 1 process until we've identified enough blue swans. And later on, I'm going to show you what enough really means. I'm going to define these things, show you exactly what enough means. But for now, you just need to get your head around the strategy. Then this step 2, once we've done that, is called scaling blue swans. So once we've created enough blue swans from testing, we can start scaling. And to scale, we find the most successful ad sets and we duplicate them multiple times, changing the budget and age range as variations while keeping the proven audience message image string the same. So when we have a profitable ad set, which is a blue swan, Within it, there's a DNA string, and it's made up of an audience, a message, and an image, and these combination of variables work together. Now what we want to do is we want to start duplicating these because it works, so we want to make more of them. However, we want to create just a tiny little micro variation in it. And we don't really want to change the string because we know the string's good, so we want to just create a tiny little variation just to kind of trick the algorithm so that it thinks it's an entirely new string. And our way of doing that is by changing the budget, because Facebook's algorithm takes the budget into account. So if you have two ad sets at, say, $20, or if you have one ad set at $20 and it works, it's a blue swan, so if you duplicate it and set it at $20, well, Facebook might think that it's the same ad set and it will just treat it as if that's really one ad set, even though to you it looks like it's separated into two. But what happens is when we change the budget, it fools the algorithm, it really tricks it. So if we have one at 20 and then the next one we create at 28 or 23 or whatever, just any random number that's not 20, then the algorithm puts it in a different category and it considers that a different string. But it's only slightly differentiated because it still has the same string. It's still got the same audience, message, image, but just the budget's changed a little bit. And most people don't understand that just by changing the budget, you're changing a variation in the string. And we're also, when we duplicate it, we're changing the initial conditions. So we're exposing the string to a different environment and different initial conditions. So sometimes it's possible to actually have a profitable ad set and have a blue swan and duplicate it 3 times and see all 3 duplicate cloned copies fail and be red swans. And sometimes that can confuse people because they're like, what? I thought I found the right DNA string. How did it fail? Because each time you're duplicating it, it's not just a carbon copy. It's not a clone. You've got new initial conditions, and those are more important than the ad itself. And you've also got different budgets and all of that. So each time you duplicate it, you might think you're just cloning the same thing, and you're cloning the string, but the initial conditions are different, and that can make all the difference. So what we want to do is we want to duplicate these things and just change the budget a little bit, and sometimes we change the age range too. So if we were targeting like 16 or 18 to 55-year-olds or whatever, well, we could change it to like 18 to 53. So it's barely like we've changed anything, but again, we're kind of tricking the algorithm, and Facebook thinks it's a totally different string. And so we get to keep the DNA string the same, but we get to make it different in small little ways. And that's how we scale it. We start duplicating this, because if we see it's proven once, we want to keep duplicating it, and that's how we really scale up. And once we work through these 2 phases here, phase 1 and phase 2, or stage 1 and stage 2, and we're constantly testing new things, and then when we find ones that work, we're scaling them up, testing new things, scaling them up. And after enough of this, you'll be very quickly, when you do this properly, you will be scaled right up, and your problem will not be Facebook ads. Your problem will be like hiring people and trying to get systems in place to manage all of the customers that you have. Like I can scale Facebook ads so fast that within 1 month, I can pretty much break my entire company. And that's pretty much what I did last year. I scaled up so much so quickly that I pretty much broke my entire company, and I had to hire, it's taken me the last 8 months to hire enough people to catch up with the demand. So once you learn these methods, your problem isn't going to be scaling and making money. Your problem is going to be trying to hire people and catch up with the scale. This is the part that becomes actually pretty easy. And then stage 3 is managing blue swans. So as we scale our blue swans, we need to constantly check on them to make sure they are still within KPI and trending the right way. And to keep the population of blue swans healthy, we constantly duplicate the healthiest ones while deleting the unhealthy ones to keep refreshing the population. We want to take from the bottom and add to the top all the time. It's like, just imagine you've got like a fish tank or something. You constantly need to be kind of draining the bad water out and kind of adding the new water in. You need to constantly keep it fresh. You can't leave it sitting stagnant. Because even if you have like a whole collection of blue swan ad sets and they're working fine one day, if you just leave them, then eventually all of them will die and all of them will turn into red swans. Just because something's a blue swan one day doesn't mean it's going to be a blue swan forever. The environment's constantly changing, and based on the initial conditions, we don't really know what the evolutionary stream is going to end up with for these different swans. So it's important that when they do work, that we duplicate them. We try and get them to breed. And then when we duplicate them, as different swans get sick and whatnot, it doesn't affect us so much because we're constantly adding new ones to the population. So that's a very important lesson. When you're managing blue swans, you have to be looking at them all the time and seeing which ones are kind of getting sick, and you need to be adding new healthy ones into the population more frequently than ones are getting sick and withdrawing from the population, because that way you're always keeping your audience you're always keeping your population of blue swans constant, or better, you're constantly growing it and it's not declining. So that's an important lesson to learn. So in the beginning, if you're just setting up this stuff, we're going to work through these 1, 2, 3 stages sequentially. We're going to do testing, then once we've done that, we're going to scale, and then once we've scaled, we're going to manage. And then once we've kind of managed it and we've got it to where you want it to be, it's going to be a constant process of all 3 of these things. Even for me today, after doing Facebook ads for years, every day, I'm really testing new things, I'm scaling different things, and I'm managing things. I'm turning things off, I'm duplicating different things. So once you get to stage 3, it's a constant sort of cycle of doing all 3 of these things to keep the population of blue swans fresh, active, and growing, and all of that. Now let's talk about the big mistake everybody makes. And there's a lot of them with Facebook ads, but this one is a big one, and you'll see how blindingly obvious it is when I explain it here. So the big mistake everybody makes with Facebook ads is assuming a profitable ad set will always be a profitable ad set. So they create different ads in their testing, then they find some that work, they turn off the ones that don't, and then what they do is they're like, yes, I've found it. So they just might increase the budget or something, and then it's working, and they're like, yeah, this thing's working. And then, a week goes by or whatever, maybe 4 days goes by more of the time, and then it stops working. And then when it stops working, they assume that the ad no longer works, and they refresh the creative. Oh yes, the ad is broken. I know what happened. I had this ad and it was working, and now it's not working, and the ad is broken. I can see how someone made that assumption, but they're wrong. And so the last thing you want to do is refresh the creative. When I hear people say this, I'm like, man, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. So a good example to look at is nature, to really see what the correct method for us to do is. So in nature, the environment is always changing, and a genetic trait that is helpful in one environment can be harmful in another. And, we can see this with example, penguins, for example. Penguins genetically are made for cold weather, right? That's their environment. So they've got good genetics for a cold environment. However, if you put them in the desert, they don't have very good traits. So it's not really, traits aren't just good traits. Traits are only good when compared to an environment. Humans are good on Earth, but we're not good underwater. However, fish are good underwater, they're not good on Earth. The environment changes everything. And with Facebook, the environment's always changing. New advertisers are coming in and they're advertising. Niches are changing, Facebook's changing, different preferences are changing, the economy's changing. It's a forever changing environment. And just because something worked at one stage doesn't mean it's going to work in a new stage, because the environment's literally changing. So because the environment is always changing, just because an ad set works right now doesn't mean it will continue to work forever. And eventually all blue swans will die. So I've seen some blue swans hang on for 4 months, which is pretty insane. Most ad sets don't last anywhere near that long. But even those ones, those things which you think are thoroughbred racehorses, you're just whoa, this thing is working and it's been working forever. Even those, they stop working. Eventually all blue swans will die. And in nature, healthy genetics survive longer than unhealthy genetics. And because of this, they tend to propagate and produce offspring. So if you remember back to week 4, how we talked about natural selection and all of that stuff, we talked about how, for example, there might be brown beetles and green beetles, and if there's a predator in the environment, like a bird, and it's got a preference for green beetles, then the green beetles are going to get eaten first, and then so the brown beetles are going to live longer, they're going to have more babies and everything, so eventually there's going to be more brown beetles than green ones, and eventually there will be no green ones at all, right? Very simple example. So if you've got the right genetics, if you're a beetle, well, then you're going to live longer. And typically when they live longer, they're going to propagate. They're going to have offspring. And so that's what happens in nature. The healthy genetics and the preferential genetics, they tend to reproduce. And when you have a blue swan, the last thing you want to do is keep it running till it dies and then create a completely new one. And this is what everybody does. You know, people have an ad set that works and it's profitable, and they're like, yes, this thing's working. And then they just leave it until it dies, and then they create a totally new thing. This is pretty mad. And while the blue swan is healthy, it should propagate and produce offspring of its own, just like how things do in nature. So when you have an ad set that's working and it's profitable, while it's healthy, working and profitable, you want to start propagating it. You want to start duplicating it, cloning it, starting to reproduce it. Because you know eventually that healthy blue swan's going to die. So while it's alive and while its DNA is good and everything, you want to start duplicating it out. And you know that way, if you're constantly duplicating the good DNA, then you're constantly doing what organisms and everything do in nature, which is adapting to the environment and reproducing when things are good and not producing when things are bad. And that's what we're doing. We're not trying to duplicate and scale out red swans, we're just turning them off. But when we find a blue one, we don't just want to look at it and be like, oh, this thing's working, until it's not working, which is what everyone's doing, which is pretty crazy, but we want to duplicate it, we want to propagate it. And this next thing is one of my most dangerous tactics. And I've never really shared this one before, but I decided to share it in this training. And it's something that I call propagating and splicing blue swan DNA. So, with DNA, with all sort of organisms, they propagate, which means they breed. They reproduce. And then there's splicing. And splicing is when you take like a DNA strand and you cut it and you combine it with another DNA strand. So you start splicing the DNA, you start creating genetic mutations and different variations of different DNA. And that's what we can do with our blue swans. And like I said, in nature, healthy genetics survive longer than unhealthy genetics. They produce more offspring and their genetics spread. So if we have a blue swan ad set with a healthy audience message image DNA string, why on earth would we age it out until it dies without giving it the opportunity to produce offspring? That's just cruel. And this is what everybody does. They find a blue swan ad set, run it till it dies, and then they create a brand new one. And they repeat this process every 4 days, forever. They just keep refreshing the creative. And it's madness. And when you have a healthy blue swan, you want to propagate it by duplicating it and splicing its DNA. And first of all, I'm going to show you and I'm going to discuss the strategy of propagating blue swans. Then after we've done that, I'm going to explain the strategy of splicing blue swan DNA. They're two different things. So propagating blue swans. So when you have a healthy blue swan ad set, you don't want to just use it until it dies and then replace it with something new. That's silly. While the blue swan ad set is healthy, you want to start propagating it by duplicating the ad set and creating micro variations just by changing the budget and the age range. That's all that's necessary. Because we know the main string is healthy, so all we're trying to do is just create little tiny variations, because we don't want to just create totally different strings, because we've got a high chance of getting that wrong. That's why creating new ads all the time is stupid, because you're going back to the drawing board again. When you've got something that's working, you already know its DNA structure, You just need to just create little variations of it, tiny little iterations, and you're going to start propagating it out. And that's why we duplicate it, change the age, change the budget, and just keep duplicating like that. And the thing that no one understands is that no duplication is ever the same as the original blue swan. It has completely new initial conditions. In its initial 4 days, it's exposed to different environments and into a totally different environment compared to the initial blue swan, even though it comes from the same DNA structure. And it has bred into a new environment. It has the same DNA string, but it's different, which is perfect. It means that it's got the good DNA string, which means it's got a high chance of working, but at the same time it's different, so we have some sort of variation. So most people don't understand you can have variation this way, but you can, and when you do totally understand this, it'll change the game for you. Because it really is infinite how many times you can start propagating things. You just have to change those little things around, and you can create infinite amounts of blue swans just from initial blue swans. And the second method is called splicing blue swan DNA. So another method for propagating blue swans is to splice the original blue swan's DNA with a new mutation or variation to create a similar but different offshoot of the original blue swan. So, if we've got a blue swan, then it's got a structure of audience, message, image in its DNA string. Well, what we want to do is we want to just splice it by just changing one of those variables. We don't want to change all three because that's too risky. We want to just start playing with just changing one little variable just a little bit at a time and see if we can create an even better version or a version that's on par or the same or whatever. So to splice blue swan DNA, we change out any of the three variables that make up its genetic structure, which is made up of audience, message, image. So we're just trying to swap one of those things. So we can take a successful ad and we can run it to a new collection of audiences to find new combinations. So this would be taking an ad and an image, and that's 2 parts of 3 in the string, and then just changing it to a whole bunch of different audiences, because then we know that this combination works, but now we're going to run it to all those audiences, and we might find some more audiences that work just as well, or maybe even better. And we can take a successful ad and run it with a new collection of images. So we might keep the message and the audience constant, but we might just put in 4 new images. And we might find a new image that works better than the original image, and we might actually improve the DNA. And we might get an even better blue swan. And then we can create a new variation of the message itself while keeping the audience and the image constant. So if we keep audience, if we keep audience and image constant, then we could write a new angle. And we can do this in lots of different ways. We want to look at the original angle because it worked. And then we want to create, sometimes we create a longer version. So if we had a short version, then we'd just create a long version of the short version, because we know the short one already works, so we may as well try a little iteration that's long. Or if we had a long one, we could create a short one. Or we could just try changing around the angle just a little bit. And so we can create different offshoots of this original DNA, which is proven to be successful. This is what we call splicing the blue swan DNA. And the key is to keep 2 variables constant and iterate just 1 variable at a time so that you can keep track of cause and effect. Because the key with Facebook is we always need to know what cause is and what effect is. Once we lose cause from effect, we're doomed. And that's what I call tying Gordian's knot. Once you've done that, you're screwed. So why we keep 2 variables constant and just change 1 is because if it doesn't work, then we know that it was that 3rd variable. However, if we are to change 2 variables and it doesn't work, well, we don't know which one it was. We don't know whether it was the audience or the message, for example, because we have no idea. That's why you always have to keep 2 constant and change 1. So you wouldn't change the message, the image, and the audience, which is what every person does when they refresh the creative. They create a completely new thing all over again. That's pretty silly. You just want to keep 2 constant, change 1. And that way, if it works, you know why it worked, which is good. And if it doesn't work, you know why it doesn't work. And that's all you really need to know, because you can never really get lost when you know why things work and why things don't work. You know cause and effect. And that's what you need to constantly keep in mind. And you can have a lot of fun splicing the Blue Swan DNA like this. Like we've taken ads that are profitable, and all we've done is just taken the image out and we've just turned it black and white, or sometimes we've turned it HDR just with Photoshop or something, or sometimes we've zoomed it in, or sometimes we've just flipped it horizontally so that it's just facing the other way. We've just created these small little genetic mutations of this original ad that was working well, and sometimes we make it better, or we create a new offshoot which is doing just as well. And then when that one starts to do well, we can start propagating that one and duplicating it, and we can just keep creating variation from the initial conditions. So you can see, just from having one ad, you can create variation in so many different ways. You can just have one, like you could just create, 5 ads, run them, find 3 that are working, turn off the 2 that aren't, and then based off those 3 that are working, you can start duplicating them and changing just the budgets and the ages, and then that's propagating out a whole bunch of stuff. And then once you've kind of done that to as far as you can really take it, well, then you can start splicing the DNA. You can start changing the images, the audiences, the messages just a little bit, and then that'll create a whole new breed and a whole new species of blue swan. And then once you've done all the splicing, then you can start propagating the ones you spliced. And then you can go back to the other ones that you had just propagated, and then you can start splicing them. And you can just keep going back and forward between splicing and propagating. And you will never, ever, ever run out of possible variations. I mean, it really is limitless. And once you have a new mutation of blue swan, you can propagate it through multiple duplications and then splice its DNA again and again. And once you truly understand what I just explained, you will see that the variations in scale is truly limitless. So I know what I might have just explained might have, it might have confused some people or whatever if you haven't used Facebook before or anything, or you might be like, why is Sam talking about swans and DNA and all this stuff? It's honestly way easier to think about it the way I have worded everything. Blue swans, red swans, DNA, that sort of stuff, because it allows you to think of it as you're trying to just trying to farm some blue swans compared to trying to run ads, because when you look at the ad terminology and everything, you can get confused. But when you constantly, draw a parallel between that and the blue swan thing, it makes it very simple. And when you truly understand what I just showed you how to do, and when you truly understand the power of this playbook, which I just showed you, you will know that it's pretty dangerous. You can do a lot of damage with this playbook. And by that, I mean you can really scale. You can scale into the millions of ad spend. So, this year I plan to have our ad spend up to 100 grand a day. So we're going to be spending. This isn't even making, this is spending. We're going to be spending 100 grand a day. And we should be making like 300 to 500 grand a day. And that's how far I can take it just with this playbook. So this is the very playbook that I am using. And just through splicing and propagation and all of the different things I've shown you in this playbook. So it's a very powerful playbook. You might have to watch this video a couple of times to truly understand it. Or when you start advertising on Facebook, come back to this video and watch it again after you've started, because it's one of these videos that for some people it will really resonate with them and they'll totally get what I'm saying. And for other people, they might not really get what I'm saying until they've tried Facebook a couple of times, and then it will make sense. So don't forget about this one, because I know at the right time when people will see this and understand it, they will know how powerful this stuff is. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one right now, which is where we're going to set our ad hypothesis, and then after that we're going to set our audience hypothesis. So that's where we really start taking action, and we start creating some ads, picking out some audiences, and getting ready to launch our campaign and really start breeding these blue swans and start growing our blue swan empire. So that's it for this training. Thanks. I'll see you in the next one.